From the latest on Caribbean cruises to kosher safaris, pilgrimages to Jewish Eastern Europe, and award-winning wines and international cuisine in sun-drenched Tel Aviv. Sit back and enjoy the trip with the travel edition of the Jerusalem Post podcast.
Another day, another square.
The one joyous thing one can say about Europe is that the squares are magnificent. Take the classic example of Brussels. I think there's pretty much agreement that Brussels main square, which is rectangular, is one of the most phenomenal squares anywhere in Europe. But then once you leave the square, there's not much to see.
I'm a big fan of Potsdamer Platz in Berlin because it has a CNA and a Primark next to each other.
These are British, actually CNA is no longer British,
It's
but
European.
Shopping institutions. We are in a place that is impossible to pronounce.
Or spell.
If you just read it, because it starts with an R, but you never hear the R. And we've been reliably informed by locals that it's pronounced Rzeszow.
Rzeszow.
What are we going to be doing?
Rzeszow is the capital of the Sub-Carpathian region. We're in the shadow of the Carpathian Mountains.
And we're in the shadow of what looks like a tremendous old town hall. The town hall is in the middle of the square, surrounded by shops and what were presumably once homes.
Having arrived late last night, this is our first real look at it. In a few minutes we're going to go and meet our guide and follow the trail of the Jews of Rzeszow and their history.
My name is Anita Rutkowska. I am a guide who is telling you a little bit about Rzeszów. We are standing now in front of Aaron Levin's house. He used to be well-known rabbi, assimilated Jew. He was a member of Polish parliament in the end of the 19th century.
I can see on the corner there's a Star of David. Would that have been added after the war, or is this something that would have survived during the war?
From what I've heard, this is a star that was placed on a building during the war, because all the buildings, all the businesses belonging to the Jews had to be marked.
This side of the city, quite a lot of the Jewish buildings seem to have survived. Is there a reason in Rzeszów that the buildings are still standing? You go to some cities in Poland and nearly everything has been destroyed.
It's not exactly true. Only part of the buildings survived because the Germans were very efficient at demolishing everything that was connected with Jewish culture. Most of the old Jewish buildings were rebuilt by Poles after the war.
Anita, why did you get involved in this? I know earlier on in our tour you mentioned that your grandmother worked for a Jewish tailor right in the middle of the main square. Is that your involvement? Is that your passion, or is there more?
Not really. I started to read more about the history of Rzeszów, and I was so impressed by the numbers of Jewish people living here, by the fact that they were actually the minority, which I never heard about, because during communism time, the Jews were also not the most popular subject during history lessons. So it's only now, when the new generations start to show interest in the history, we rediscover facts obvious to people who are hardly alive.
We've driven up into what looks like somebody's house.
Like a family house.
Like a family house. Where are we?
We are in a place where there's entrance to a fallout shelter, and you're right, we are standing in front of a usual family house.
What's special about this family house? Because we've seen a lot of houses on the way here. Why have we stopped at this house?
This is a cover-up. We will be taken by a guide to the basement. It's a very deep basement. It's part of the Museum of Technology and Military, but it's the fallout shelter, and it was created as a backup center for the civil defense in time of Cold War. That's the most important information. Many buildings of a similar shape were built during the times of a civil war.
David, I know you and I have this love affair with heights. How are you with going deep underground?
Little bit of claustrophobia, but this will be absolutely fine. Very interested to see what's inside.
Some strange parts of this house as we walk by. A ventilation system coming out the bottom. A little bit of barbed wire over a fence. And then parked in the lawn of this house, there is a tank and a couple of military lorries. So this clearly is not a normal house. And to my left, I've suddenly seen a man wearing a gas mask and nuclear fallout uniform in a sentry box. At the back of the lawn, there is some light artillery. It really brings new meaning to the phrase parking your tanks on the lawn.
Would you believe that in this shelter, that for us looks like a regular house, actually lived a family? The neighbors mentioned that they were not allowed to have any visitors, any guests, and the children couldn't play with other children here in this area.
Oh, so you couldn't have people round for tea while the government
no.
were operating their backup shelter underneath?
Rather not.
As we descend the steps, you're saying that really this is quite a unique place in Poland?
Yes, this place was a backup, like a command center, and when we drove here, you've noticed it only took us probably 3 or 4 minutes. The location is crucial. It's not far from the Central Committee of the Communist Party. Then it was the main place. In case of atomic attack, it would only take 3 or 4 minutes to get from there to here to the shelter.
We have left behind us the generators and the sewage areas, and now we're coming into an area that clearly was more for living in. I'm next to what's been left here, which was I think what an American would call a cot. It's just a foldable bed in a corner. We'll find out what this place was from our guide.
Now in a place where a doctor was checking the radiation level of people entering the shelter. We are in a room that served as a telephone exchange, and there was a direct line to Moscow.
Our guide here has just turned on the air filters to give you an idea of the type of noise that people who stayed down here would have to live with as well. Now, there are lots of doors that do lock, but to have these types of noises constantly going on, but if you wanted air that actually worked, this was the type of system that had to be operated. Remember, this is 15 meters below ground, that's about 20 yards below ground. It's just a really, really difficult space to have lived in, but that was the price of being a soldier in the Cold War.
So when was this shelter decommissioned?
The shelter was kept by the army till 2009, and people didn't know about the existence of this place till 2018. And we are in 2021 now.
We've moved on now to a village called Markowa, about 20 kilometers east of Rzeszów. We've come to what looks like a barn from the outside, but is a very modern and very stark, austere, but beautiful building.
Now we are in Museum of Poles Saving Jews during the Second World War. My name is Kamil Kopera and I'm a researcher here. This place tells a story about Poles who dared to rescue Jews during Holocaust time. This museum is focused on one particular story of family of Józef and Victoria Ulma, who in this village give shelter to 8 Jewish people and paid ultimate praise because they were killed by German gendarmes in 1944 here in Markowa. In September 1939, around 20,000 Jewish people from this part of Poland were forced to run away to the Soviet side, to the part of Poland taken by the Russian army.
Would you say the Jews in Markowa were quite integrated within the village?
They lived side by side. They knew each other. They knew their Polish neighbors. Polish neighbors knew their Jewish neighbors. This situation lasted until August 42, when Jews from this village were forced to leave. Only 15 to 20 people from Markowa, Jewish people from Markowa, were taken from this village. Around 80 people try to survive in Markowa or in the surroundings, in the forests, in the ravines, and the situation lasted nearly until end of 1942.
Outside of where we're standing now are a number of white glass walls in a rectangle shape, probably about 25 foot by 15 foot. And when you come inside, it's split into rooms, and this room we're stood in now has a number of beds in here. Is there a story behind where we're standing?
Yeah, this is the place. It's a recreation of the home where Ulma family lived during wartime. So imagine in this very small room, 8 Polish people. Józef, Victoria, and 6 of their kids lived during the war. In the attic, 8 Jewish people were hiding. 5 people from Saul Goldman family, Saul and his 4 sons, and 3 women from Markowa. Goda Goldman, her sister Leah, and child of one of these women. We do not know the name of this child.
What's the story of the Olme family?
Someone, probably Navy Blue policeman Włodzimierz Leś, informed German gendarmes that Jews are hidden in the attic. Germans surrounded this place, going inside the building, shooting in the attic. During these first shots, few Jews were killed in the attic, and others were dragged outside and killed. Then Germans decided to punish Polish people for sheltering Jews, and all members of the Ulma family, including children, were killed.
You're a young man, you're a researcher. How do you feel about this? When you come to work every day, are you coming as a historian and just looking at this through the eyes of a researcher? Or does it ever affect you here to think of both the bravery and the tragic story? How do you relate to it?
So, this story, for me, is a symbol of older families who dare to rescue Jewish people and who can share this very dark fate of this family. Every day I working with that kind of story. Of course, most of the stories, they got sometimes happy end. Sometimes working with survivors, with second or third generation who bring me the stories of their parents, of their grandparents. But I always got in mind that this story that I'm working with can be so dark as this one.
I'm going to ask you a difficult question, and you don't have to answer it if you don't want. There were clearly many cases of Poles that saved Jews. You have this museum here. In Israel, you have the Avenue of the Righteous, which honors all of the people that save lives. But some people argue that this is here to cover the story that a lot more people didn't help save lives and were involved, were complicit in the deaths of Jews and Catholics and political prisoners and gypsies in Poland. How do you feel this museum fits into the landscape? Does it tell a good story, or is it here to maybe hide a worse story?
We are showing the story of the heroes, but we are showing the full spectrum of the behaviors. We are not forcing people to believe the majority of Polish people was involved in helping. Most of them were bystanders. They were afraid to do anything. Of course, there was people who were actively involved in hurting Jewish people. Even few righteous among the nation were involved in some crimes against Jewish people. Here in our exhibition, we got also information about this dark part of the history. We are not trying to whitewash something. We are trying to focus on the heroes, but showing the full aspect full complexity of the wartime story.
At the edge of the recreation of the Ulmer house is a family tree. Notable is the date, the 24th of March 1944, when the Ulmer family were killed. And really, really heartbreaking, at the top is the picture of the 6 Ulmer children. Stanislava, who was 7, Barbara, who was 6, Władysław, who was 5, František, who was nearly 4, Anthony, who was 2.5, Maria, who was 1.5, all shot dead by the Germans on the 24th of March 1944. And next to it there's a small inscription saying, "A child without a name who died in its mother's womb on the day of her death." Camille, thank you for your time and taking us around.
Thank you for visiting this place. Thank you, just thank you.
Heavy breathing, because we're halfway up a bell tower in Przemysl.
We're in another unpronounceable town. We're actually really, almost literally, a stone's throw away from the Ukrainian border. We're as far east as we're going on this trip. I'm going to try now, it's Przemysl. You're going to say it.
Przemysl.
Przemysl. This is Lawrence, who's one of our guides.
He's not actually called Lawrence, but we can't pronounce his name. What's your name in Polish?
Wawrzyniec.
See, that's why. So, those of you that have ever listened to us know that when we still get my breath back from the stairs, when we like to travel, we like to find the obscure museum of every town. And we were told there was a museum of bells and pipes. So I was thinking instantly bells, organ pipes. But it's not that sort of pipe, is it?
Behind me are shisha or hookah pipes, and beyond them is an image of Arabia showing the types of origins of these types of pipes. And behind Mark, we have various other smoking pipes from, I guess, predominantly... Actually, I don't know. I was going to say that those are predominantly European, but
yes.
Yeah, they are. Mm-hmm. Some of the images on them and the carving on the wood is so intricate.
These tobacco pipes we're looking at are from 19th century Hungary and Austria. To the right, the nargila, the water pipes, are more 20th century Middle East.
What we're going to do is very quickly run up the stairs, because this is a very, very brief visit, and we will tell you what we're going to get to next. But I'm guessing if those were the pipes, that the bells might be at the top of this staircase. And the reason that I'm holding the microphone is that Mark is incapable of walking and talking. So there you go. Mark, describe for us what we can see.
So David said run, so I got here. We're in a bell tower, so what better to find in a bell tower than bells? And not the bells are Hussid type, but clay bells. Clay bells ring, are you listening?
These are the casts in which the bells were made. So if you look inside a small clay bell to our right, you can see that it's been partially opened, and within is an iron cast bell. I think we'll stop recording because we've got lots more steps to go up and our lunch is waiting. So any final words from here, Mark?
So if you come to Przemysl, try and find half an hour to visit the Museum of Bells and Pipes. We're still in Przemysl. Everybody looking at me as I pronounce it. But we will get there one day, and we've been joined by a local guide with an encyclopedic knowledge of the city.
My name is Adam. We are now standing in the place where before Second World War there used to be entire Jewish district. We are in so-called Ryby-Platz, which in English would be Fish Square. This is where two main synagogues of Przemysl were located, as well as houses of the almost entire Jewish population. There were also second synagogue. There were two of them actually, one from late 16th century and one from 19th century, that were located very near one to another. The older one, the old synagogue, were for more Orthodox community, while the temple designed for more modern or reformed Jewish community. During Second World War, unfortunately, as this part of town was immediately on the attack line in 1941 when Third Reich attacked Soviet Russia, and during the war Przemysl was divided between Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia. The part where we are standing right now belonged to Soviet Russia. This part of town were heavily damaged during the beginning of Operation Barbarossa. After the war, however, those buildings that were still standing, including the synagogue, which was heavily damaged but still standing in the 50s, communist authorities decided that it was too dangerous to let it stand because apparently it was on the verge of collapsing. They decided to tear it down completely. So from this quite a big chunk of Jewish town here in Przemysl, there are absolutely no traces, unfortunately.
There is a small park and a parking lot. Is there any trace, even a memorial?
There is no memorial itself, but we have two surviving synagogues. They are unused right now. There is a Jewish cemetery that is still in use in Przemysl, and in this square, in Rybiplatz, there is also a museum that has an entire exhibition devoted to many confessions that had their home in Przemysl. So Judaism, but also Greek Catholicism and Catholicism.
Was there a Jewish community here after the war, and what happened to it?
Before the war, there were like between 15 and 17,000 people, so roughly 1/3 of population of Przemysl. After the war, came back only some 400 people. There is Jewish community here in Przemysl because, like I said, for example, Jewish cemetery in Przemysl is still active. There are burials until this day there. But there is, for example, no synagogue that would be active, no place of worship whatsoever. There are Jewish families, but I think they are completely assimilated. Still see the traces of history of Przemysl even today. For example, this building before us, it's so-called Narodny Dom, so the national house. It was made in 1904 from money collected among Greek Catholic and Ukrainian community here in Przemysl. There were audience hall over there, you could take lectures over there, there was a library as well. So this is one of the traces of many cultures and many peoples that inhabited this town during its history.
We're standing in front of the city hall, the town hall, and I noticed towards the top, both on the flag and the crest, and also when we were in the Museum of Bells and Pipes, and indeed behind us, there is a fountain, and all of them have the same motif. I'm going to offer two possibilities to what the animal is that I'm looking at, and you will probably correct me. So the first one I'm going to go with is a bear. Oh, that's right, first time. What is the connection between this town and the bear?
First connection is that this area of Poland, even today, it's inhabited literally by bears. You can find bears very near to the town itself. That's the first thing. The second possibility is that one of the patron saints of Przemysl is Saint Ursula. And since Ursus in Latin means bear, it can be a connection here. Because actually this bear that's on the crest, it's actually a she-bear. And you can see the fountain with the bear, and you can see, if we go to that fountain, you can see that she has her cubs with her.
When you're surrounded by so much religion, how do people conduct themselves? How influenced are they by the church? How much does it form part of their everyday life?
Well, I think if you are surrounded by anything all your life, you just stop seeing this. More than 90% of Polish people identify themselves as Christians or Catholics, to be more precise. But I think there is this discrepancy between your everyday life and what the church tells you. So I'm not saying that they are leading this double life, and I'm speaking for myself at least.
I think it's the same, certainly for me, when I moved to Israel from the UK, that in the UK, Judaism didn't surround us every day. You had to go and seek it out. And in many ways, for me, it made me more believing and more faithful because it wasn't something that was taken for granted. Whereas in Israel, it is everywhere. It permeates every part of society, whether it's a synagogue, a church, or obviously a mosque. I think I totally get where you're coming from. Now, Mark and yourself have just put up umbrellas because it's probably about to storm, but we have one more place that we're going to go to visit. Just in case we don't make it there because of the rain, tell us about the final stop.
So one of our final stops, what I think I'd like to show you is that for a city that has such a long and rich history of Jewish community here in Przemysl, there aren't many traces of it, unfortunately. But there are some. Apart from cemetery, there are still surviving synagogue buildings that survived both wars. They are unused right now because there is no congregation, but I'd like to show you at least one of them, the Scheinbach synagogue from early 20th century.
So just in case we don't make it because of the rain, Adam, thank you so much for your time and for incredible knowledge of this city that you live so close to.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure guiding you.
We're in a place, and another one down to the school of murdered pronunciation. We're in Arwamov, spelled A-R Polish L-A-M-O-W. Arwamov. It could be Arwamov. It depends if you say Vodj or Vuj. So we'll call it Arwamov for the sake of it. This establishment originally was the sporting headquarters of the Polish Communist Party. It nestles in the Carpathian Mountains, very close to the border with Ukraine, and we're sat on our balcony at the moment just looking at a very wide panoramic horizon of forest-filled hills and mountains in the distance. To our left there is a whirlpool. We unfortunately are not going to get enough time to try out the facilities. There is an outdoor swimming pool as well as an indoor swimming pool, and there are huge amounts of sporting facilities here. In the winter you can go Nordic walking through the snow. I think you can play golf here. At reception there was almost an arena built with screens to show sporting events for feedback. And during Euro 2016 the Polish football team used this as their training base, I think, before they went off to France. Another interesting fact, Lech Wałęsa, who was the first president of Poland, when he was imprisoned by the Communist Party, they brought him to this facility. If he was staying in the facility we're staying in, the 6 months would have been very easy, but I don't believe this facility was used in the same way back then.
Podkarpackie or Sub-Carpathian fact file. Rzeszow Airport has a state-of-the-art terminal waiting for travellers. The airport timetable includes several flights from Warsaw every day, a daily connection with Munich, and several flights weekly from other cities in Europe. Rzeszow, the capital of Podkarpackie, is the main transport hub for the region. The new A4 motorway leads from the west towards Podkarpackie, directly into Rzeszow and onto the border with Ukraine. You can get here from Gdynia Gdansk at the seaside or from Warsaw by Pendolino trains running on a daily basis. There are also daily trains from Kiev and Lviv to Przemysl. There's an array of 3, 4 and 5-star hotels in Rzeszow. We were hosted in the Bristol. 3 and 4-star hotels can also be found in larger towns of the region such as Krosno or Przemysl. High standard accommodation is also offered by small facilities such as boutique hotels and pensions. The Arwamov Hotel is a ski resort, golf course, conference centre and sports centre all in one. $1 will buy you 3.7 Polish zloty. The climate in Poland is temperate. The average temperature in the summer is 19 degrees Celsius or 66 Fahrenheit. However, on some days temperatures reach 30 or 86. January and February are the coldest months, with temperatures below freezing. Due to the rich history of the region, the traditional cuisine of Podkarpackie is very diverse. Dishes from Podkarpackie include fudgki, which is a pancake made with flour and sauerkraut, gołąbki, stuffed cabbage with potatoes, and proziak, a pancake made of flour, kefir, eggs and soda baked on a tiled stove. And before we carry on with the rest of the podcast, we want to say a very special thank you for the provision of today's music from the Polish group Tohai.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mark.
So, following a request to the Polish Tourist Authority to send us to somewhere with an easier name to pronounce than Przemysl, we're in the town called Sanok. Sanok, which has a population of around 40,000 and is the birthplace of the Bobover Rebbe.
That's a famous Hasidic rabbi. I think the Halberstam family is the current owner of that dynasty. But where we are right now really is not so much a celebration of Jewish life, but we're going in to find out how people used to live in this part of Poland.
Sanok has this wonderful recreation of village life in the 19th century. Roman Catholic, Greek Catholic and Jewish life is recreated here. We'll be going around with the guide and we'll give you some of the highlights of the folk village in Sanok.
Hello, my name is Artur Gorecki and I'd like to welcome you in our museum, one of the biggest of its kind in Poland and in Europe as well. We've got a surface of over 38 hectares, so plenty of things to see, well over 170 objects gathered from a southeastern region of Poland. This region was very interesting before Second World War because we've had a few nationalities living next to each other peacefully for quite a while until war changed everything. All the buildings were moved here from various towns and villages in this region, put back together in our museum. I promised you it would be well worth to climb this hill. It's the most beautiful church in our museum, for me at least. I'm keep repeating Greek Catholic Church, and I'm aware that lots of the people wouldn't have any idea what I'm talking about because this particular faith is not particularly well known outside of Poland. It was a Polish creation. Above the main door, we can see a very small icon,
Yes.
which is actually the most important icon in the whole church. It's called from Greek mandilion, or from Ruthenian language spas nierukotworny, not made by human hand. And the origin of this icon is very interesting. Actually, people believe that the first original mandilion, icon of this type, was created when Christ was still alive. There are a few versions of the story telling how it happened. The most popular one says about a king of the neighboring country who fell ill, and he heard about the Jesus as a healer. He sent messengers to Jesus asking him to come to his country and heal him. Jesus couldn't do it, but instead of that, he took a piece of cloth from one of the messengers and pressed it against his face. And immediately the depiction of his face emerged on a piece of cloth. When this cloth was delivered to the king, he touched it, he was healed instantly.
So we just saw the inside of a quite astonishing church. I assume now we've come into the home of the type of person who would have attended a church like that. Just describe what we're looking at, because I think for many of us, this is very hard to imagine unless you actually see it.
The main thing when you come into a house like that, the living room, you see the oven without a chimney. It's a chimneyless house, quite common in 19th century, but in interwar period as well. Some people say that around 90% of the houses built in 19th century were chimneyless houses like that, and interwar period about 60 up to 70%.
we know from current science that smoke is not something that is good for our health. Is there any study done? Do we know anything from the past about people in these types of homes, that they were perhaps affected by smoke, lung issues? Did they live shorter lives?
Yes, of course. People don't realize actually how hard and difficult this life was. Various illnesses caused by smoke, so lung issues, as you mentioned. But as well, the general poverty, malnutrition, and the total lack of medicinal care. Doctors were available, but in small towns, usually it was 1-2 day trip, and nobody could afford to pay the fee to the doctor. So people were dying out of the most trivial, stupid reasons imaginable. Obviously, in pretty every village was a wise old woman who tried to cure some illnesses using herbs and sometimes magic as well. Yeah, maybe she could cure the mild indigestion or something like that, but she wouldn't perform even the simplest operation, like removing appendix, for instance. I had my appendix removed when I was very young. Back in the day, I'd be dead for a long time now. And when you look at the old cemeteries, you can notice that people were rarely living over 40 years old. When you were 40, you were actually, an old person. If it comes to women, they tend to live even shorter lives. Usually they were dying out of the complications during labor. They were getting married very early, when they were 13, 14 years old. By the time they were 20, they might have as well 6 kids or something. So majority of them were unlucky during one of the labors and they were dying out of it. So it was short life filled with brutal hard work. People were pretty much always hungry and they were dying very early.
This building on the left, the structure looks quite familiar. I can see a menorah in one of the windows. Can you tell me something about the building?
It's a synagogue, and it's supposed to be here because I've mentioned to you that majority of the towns in this region of Poland were mixed, Polish and Jewish. We had sizable minority of Jewish people in Sanok before war, about 17 synagogues and houses of prayers. After war, just 2 synagogues were left standing. This is just a copy of the synagogue because the original building was destroyed by Germans in 1942. But we've got quite a few pictures depicting this synagogue, how it looked like before Second World War. So I've made an exact copy of this building, and we're hoping by October it will be ready, finished for tourists to see. As well, we plan to put an exhibition inside, because our museum, apart from all those folk culture buildings and churches, we've got a sizable collection of Judaica, some quite interesting, rare and expensive things as well, and nowhere to display them properly. So this will be a proper place to do so.
Our time here is done. Sadly, we could have spent all day here, but we've had limited time. Artur, thank you so much for this wonderful tour, for bringing this area from 100, 200, 300 years ago back to life for us.
You're very welcome. It was my pleasure to show you at least a little bit of our museum. I want to invite everybody listening to visit our museum. As you can see and testify, it's beautiful.
Hello, my name is Martina. Right now we are at the Church of Our Lady of Sorrows in Hatrów. This church is the largest wooden Gothic church in all of Europe from the first half of the 15th century, and its most valuable aspects are its original construction and the paintings, which date back to the medieval times. Based on recent dendrochronological research, it has been found that the wood that the church was constructed from was made in 1458 and 1459. And right now we're standing under something called Saturdays, which is a location right next to the church where people came to the Mass on Saturdays and waited until Sunday. The whole church is made out of a carcass construction, which means that no nails were used, and instead everything was connected using special notches and carpentry locks.
Amazing. I mean, it's such a big building not to have a single nail in it.
Yes.
We are surrounded by artwork. There isn't a space in this church, the walls, the ceilings, that there isn't a depiction of a story from the Old Testament or the New Testament. Was this just to make the church look beautiful?
This was actually done so that the people who couldn't read in the olden times could still learn and see representations of the scenes from the Bible.
Church looks like it's operational today. It looks beautiful. Over the last 70 years, has it always been that way, or has there been a long process to restore it?
The church experienced a difficult period during the 1950s because it had to be closed off to the public as there was a lot of leakage happening through the roof. After this time, there were a lot of reparations taking place, and it was open again to the public in the year 2000, and it got a rededication from the priest. And after this, masses started taking place here normally, and they currently take place every Sunday at 4, and there's also weddings and other ceremonies.
During the communist era, was there a movement to try and keep it as a church, or did they have other plans for this building?
During that time, there was actually a plan to move the church to the museum in Sanok, but it turned out to be too big, and instead they wanted to keep it here, but make it a museum for agricultural tools.
It's a truly extraordinary building to be stood in a 600-700-year-old building that looks this beautifully kept. And we've had an amazing tour around here. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. I hope you enjoyed it.
Welcome to Krosno. My name is Małgorzata Gonet, and I am a tour guide of the Glass Heritage Center of Krosno, which is a small glass museum where you can see how glass objects are handmade and hand decorated by our skillful glass blowers and artists. So first, our glass blowers use a tool which is called a blowpipe to take a little portion of hot glass out from the furnace. Then they use special glass powders and glass frits to color the surface of every glass object.
Yeah, it's starting to take shape, and it's blue and white, and it looks like a set of fairy wings or angel wings. It's just amazing to see how quickly his hands move as he does this. It's hundreds and hundreds of different little intricate movements, but his hand is moving so quickly.
Thank you very much indeed for a fascinating tour and for introducing us into the world of glass.
Thank you very much. Welcome to Krosno one more time. See you in the future, maybe.
Okay, so we are here in Kombornia in our family's estate, and now we are in my little kingdom. This is the Carpathian wine saloon. This is the first wine cellar in Sub-Carpathian region. And what is the idea behind this place? Well, we are trying to combine the flavors and the taste typical for this region with the wines from Carpathia. So we, apart from the hotel business, apart from the spa, from the hotel, from restaurant, we are also the wine importers, and we import wine from Romania, from Slovakia, from Czech Republic, and from Hungary. And also we are reselling and presenting the wines from Polish winemakers. And also the Carpathian Wine Saloon. This is the place where we are running the wine tasting, where this is very, very small courses about the wine. Not only trying to present those wines, but also I'm trying to introduce the new wine members to a wine world, because I'm just trying to do my best to show what is the wine and how to drink it.
I'm not going to keep you too long because Isa, who is one of our hosts here, who's taking us around, is desperate to start the wine.
She is.
So if you want to carry on, I can see a lot of wine in front of us. While you're talking, that would be great.
Okay.
So we're starting with a lighter white wine. Is that generally what one does? One starts with the lighter and moves to something more heavy?
Typically, and usually when I start the wine tasting, I'd rather focus on the acidity. Because when we are drinking the wine, and I just have to prepare you for the whole tasting. For this very particular wine, I'd like to introduce you to very light wines that are not aged in oak barrels, because this is a totally different style. And after tasting the wines from the oak barrels, this kind of wine will be just spoiled. It will be not as good in the taste as it should be. And about the Sharba, what do you feel in it? What are the aromas? It is a very light, it's very fruity.
Grape.
Yeah. Good for you, 10 points for you. Yeah, this is a very light wine. Fruits, a lot of fruits. There are some rose petals, some lychee fruits, some apples. This is a very light wine.
I don't know anything about wine.
Yeah.
But if I had to guess, I would have said Riesling or Riesling, depending on how you pronounce it.
Okay.
I already know because you said it.
Yeah.
But it has that light
It is
freshness.
It is. It is crispy. Yes, it is crispy. There are some acidity. You can feel the acidity in your nose. Please, if you feel something, if you find some aromas or a taste in wine, then just say it.
Okay.
Because there is no wrong answer. About it. This is something that is very silly for me, that during the other wine courses, the sommelier or the host of the tasting will tell you have to feel something like apples, like rose petal, etc., etc., etc. And if you don't feel it, then you are totally wrong.
There are sort of four categories, right, that you're meant to go through.
Yeah. But if you don't feel it, it's okay.
Good for you.
Good for you. If you found something totally different, like grapes, for example, okay, there are some grapes in it. Perfect. And because you have to enjoy your wine.
Do I need to move my glass around to give it a bit of centrifugal force?
It depends.
Go on.
It depends, because for one last time, just smell the wine.
I just got my nose wet.
Oh well. Sometimes it happens.
I have a big nose.
Yeah. So you have a perfect nose for
wine.
And just please try to remember those aromas, because when we swirl the wine and we put some centrifugal forces into the glass, what we are doing, we are not only heating up the glass, not the glass, but the wine, but also we are putting some air inside. And we are just destroying this very light, fruity aromas, and we are digging into the proper wine aromas.
I have to point out that your spinning your glass around was much easier for you than for me, because sensibly you only put a little amount of wine in yours and you filled mine up quite a bit.
Oh my.
He's now
well, we are from Poland and we know how to handle the alcohol.
At this point we might switch off and be back in about 30 minutes, but you might not understand what we're saying. It's about 40 minutes since I last spoke on here, and I'm much happier than I was 40 minutes ago. My new friend Nicholas, or Mikołaj, has kept us entertained and educated us about the wines of the Carpathian region.
Yeah, sorry for that.
No, it's been really entertaining. I mean, the whole story of your family retiring from IT and then investing in a hotel and growing this manor and the hotel and starting this wine business has been fascinating. And I would love to come back again with more time, so I'm going to be writing to the Polish Tourist Authority to say we can come back here. But thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We have to do another couple of thank yous because our time in Sub-Carpathia is at an end. So a very, very big thank you to Isabella and
Wawrzyniec,
or Lawrence, as we call him.
As we've been trying to call him.
So
it's amazing how alcohol helps you get there.
Mark, you're actually holding a bottle. So in traditional British way, let's go out of Sub-Carpathia with a Polish song.
Roll out the barrels, we'll have a barrel of fun. Roll out